If your quest for longevity feels overwhelming, here's some good news. It starts with one simple daily habit. MitoPure gummies from Timeline. They're the first ever longevity gummies that ignite mitophagy, your body's natural anti-aging pathway. MitoPure is a clinically validated solution backed by over 15 years of research. MitoPure gummies utilize a powerful compound that redefines what's possible for your longevity. MitoPure produces the first ever urolithin A gummies that support your cellular energy so you feel strong, clear, and vibrant. Boost your cellular energy and enhance muscle strength and endurance, all without changing your diet or exercise routine. As someone who loves to stay active, I've noticed a significant boost in my workouts since I started using it. I feel stronger and more energized, and my recovery time has improved dramatically. Better recovery starts at the cellular level. For more information and to order, just go to timeline.com/Hoffman. Use coupon code Hoffman at checkout for 20% off. That's timeline.com/Hoffman for 20% off MitoPure gummies with code Hoffman. Welcome to today's Intelligent Medicine Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Ronald Hoffman. Today we're going to talk about ways that we can harness brain science to improve our functioning, particularly when it comes to women at midlife, because a lot of women experience challenges at midlife. Women are the sandwich generation. They have a lot of responsibilities, but also their bodies and their brains undergo changes. And sometimes it's hard to cope. And so today we're going to talk to a cognitive neuroscientist who has broken down the complex concepts behind how the brain functions and offers news that you can use on how to optimize your daily functioning. She's Dr. Therese Houston, and she is a cognitive neuroscientist and author of Sharp, 14 Simple Ways to Improve Your Life with Brain Science. She is PhD, a cognitive scientist at Seattle University, and she's founding director of the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning at Seattle University. So she's a great communicator. She has written for the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, Time Magazine, The Guardian, Harvard Business Review, and that is all culminating in her latest book, Sharp, 14 Simple Ways to Improve Your Life with Brain Science. And so what's interesting about the book is, I must admit that I sped read it, but I actually find many of the concepts applicable to me, shall we say, an older male, so I don't think that we can confine it to just, perimenopausal women or, postmenopausal women, but there definitely is something about midlife that's especially challenging for women. So what is it that differentiates the stresses or the challenges that women who are 50 or 60 experience vis-a-vis the rest of the populace?
Well, first, thank you for having me on, Ron. It's a real treat to be
My
here.
pleasure.
And I'd also like to say that you may have some fans out there who are like, oh, I'm not in this age group or that demographic. Please stay tuned, because chances are you have someone in your life who this conversation will apply to, maybe a mom or an aunt or your partner, or maybe it doesn't apply right now, but it will in a few years. Or it could be you're a woman in your 20s or 30s and you think, oh, I don't have to worry about this for a while, but you can actually build what we like to call cognitive reserve, right? You can actually start adding more brain tissue when you're young so that when you get older, you've got more to draw upon. So I want to say that.
And by the way, that is like one of my main goals in life. And there's so many things that I do. And actually many of the strategies that you talk about are things that I'm already doing to preserve and augment my brain function, because, as we age, there are challenges.
There really are. And whether you're a man or a woman, the research is clear that after about age 40, there are two key brain areas that we lose about 5% of every decade.
Yikes.
So yeah, it's a
I
startling
thought it was like the
statistic.
brain cells that I lost in my college dormitory when
Yes.
we'd wake up after, pulling an all-nighter, on a bender, and then we'd say, how many brain cells did I lose? But actually, the brain has plasticity, can regenerate. So there's hope.
There is hope. And it is true. I think that, depending, you and I might be of a similar generation. We remember those ads of this is your brain on drugs. And right, we had the
Right,
sense
right.
that as long as you made good choices in your teens and 20s, you were going to hold on to all of your brain for the rest of your life. Well, and unfortunately, we do lose brain cells, particularly in the area of the prefrontal cortex, right behind your forehead, and then your hippocampus. And again, you lose about 5% of those every decade, starting at 40. So at 50, you might not notice, but at 60, chances are you're like, oh, words aren't coming to me as quickly as they used to. And that's in part because your hippocampus is so crucial for memory. So you asked about women I move it even to their 40s, 50s, and 60s. What are the special challenges that they face? And you've already pointed out that's a sandwich generation, and this notion that you're still caring potentially for your children at home, but you're also beginning to care for aging parents or in-laws if you have a partner. And women, no matter how liberal your household, chances are women are still bearing more of that burden than their male partners are. And researchers find
And
that
increasingly, women are working as well. And I think that's kind of
exactly.
a sort of a historical anomaly, is that, women traditionally more domestic, more stay at home.
Mm-hmm.
And men, would go out in the world. And now this is virtual equality, but that comes with a price because the women still have the lion's share of the home responsibilities in most cases. So double trouble.
Exactly. And they're finding that in terms of caring for aging parents, men will often pick up prescriptions for their parents or work out the online plan for taking care of their bills, right? But it's the women who are doing the showing up and doing the caretaking and helping the parents purge their homes so they can downsize, whatever it might be. It's often the women and those are bigger time commitments that you can't just do when it's convenient for you, right? You have to do it when they need you to show up and help them move their bed or something like that. So it's tough. There can be not just the stresses at work, because women often are seeing this as their prime earning potential in their 40s and 50s, just like men are. So they want to continue working and performing at work. But then they're also having more responsibilities at home, not just the young ones, but their older ones suddenly having more needs. So it can be a very stressful time. And what makes it especially hard then is perimenopause and menopause. I was shocked to learn, I don't know about you, but I thought perimenopause, around menopause, it sounds like it's only a year or two. But for most women, it's 7 to 9 or 10 years, right?
Yeah.
Perimenopause can be a long time. And that's a period, for those who aren't familiar with it, where your hormones are going up, your estrogen levels are going up and down and up and down. And as a
It's
result,
not like turning off the light switch. It's like there's a
no,
lot of turbulence and fluctuation.
exactly. It would be like if we've all had the experience where weather means the light flickers on and off, right? In your house, and the power goes on and it goes off and it goes on and it goes off. Well, that's what it would be like, except imagine that lasting for almost a decade, right? That's the unpredictability of it all, and your body's not able to adjust and kind of get into one mode. So as a result, it's very stressful on women's bodies and brains. There are estrogen receptors throughout the brain and body. And as a result, the brain can't adapt. And the good news is, after you go through menopause, after you stop producing estrogen altogether in the body, then your body and your brain can adapt. And for instance, women often experience something called brain fog during perimenopause.
Right.
And approximately 80% of women, it goes away after they're done with menopause. Not because estrogen levels have gone back up, but simply because they're not fluctuating anymore and the brain can adapt.
And there's an adaptation.
There's an adaptation, exactly.
Right.
And so there is good news, right? Some women say, am I ever going to get my brains back? And you will.
The book is not about, it's not prescriptive, like,
No.
you should take estrogen. It's not about that. But, as a neuroscientist, you're very familiar with the debate about estrogen. I mean, some studies suggest that estrogen is a net negative when it comes to cognition. And other studies say it's the boon to womankind, that it preserves cognitive function. So what's your take on the controversy about estrogen replacement for brain preservation and optimization?
It's tricky. So I'm not an MD. And like you said, I don't talk about hormone replacement therapy
you don't
in
go
the
there.
book, right? I don't go there. But I think the alarming statistics come when we especially look at Alzheimer's for women that have their ovaries removed before age 45. So that's an unusual group, right? But for some women, for certain women with cancers, they need to have their ovaries removed at a young age. And their rate of Alzheimer's is 30% higher than other women their age. So there's something about having high estrogen levels for a long time or higher estrogen levels that is protective of the brain. And I'm not saying that they should then therefore go on HRT, but we do see that there's some kind of relationship between your estradiol levels and brain health. And so there's, like you said, there's more research that needs to be done, but I would be having that conversation.
Strokes for different folks. It may be that there's some women who are the beneficiaries and others not.
Exactly.
So, So, getting past that. So what's going on with brain fog? Can you give a kind of a layman's definition? We don't necessarily have to invoke the hippocampus and the locus coeruleus. And, I mean, let's not get lost in all the brain regions. What's happening?
So brain fog is, just in simple terms, it's a reduction in focus and the ability to concentrate and remember things. And so all of us may say, oh, I have mornings like that, or things aren't coming to you quickly. And this term brain fog is used to describe what women go through during perimenopause, where they have difficulty concentrating and focusing on a regular basis. And there are a couple of factors that contribute to it. We won't get deep into brain areas, but we can talk briefly about the fact that estrogen increases dopamine in the brain. And so if estrogen, like we said, the lights are turning on and off, if estrogen's high one day and low the next, your brain isn't getting the dopamine levels that it's used to. It's fluctuating. And so that's going to dopamine affects focus and your ability to concentrate. So that's going to be part of it, the story. The other part is something called lymphatic clearance. I love the analogy.
Yeah.
Have you talked about lymphatic clearance on the show?
Yes, but explain it because I think it's an important factor, and it has to do with sleep.
Yes. Yeah. So a lot of women will say that and this is one of the most common side effects of going through perimenopause, is that they have hot flushes at night. They're waking up with night sweats and their sleep is very disrupted. And that's bad for the brain, because one of the things that's happening, especially during the early part of the night where you're getting deep sleep, is something called lymphatic clearance. And the analogy I like to make is, imagine that you've got a busy conference room, okay? At the end of the day, a busy conference room is going to have paper cups on the conference table, and there's going to be some trash that someone didn't quite make it all the way to the trash can. It's going to be a mess, right? Thank goodness the cleaning crew comes in at night and cleans it all up so that for the next morning, everything's nice and clean so that everyone can have a productive day in that conference room. That's lymphatic clearance. It's basically you're clearing out the space so that in the morning, you're able to think clearly. Over the course of the day, the junk builds up. If you're waking up throughout the night and not getting deep sleep, especially, you're basically having a crowded, junky conference room, and it's not ready for the next day, and it just makes your ability to focus and be productive that much harder. And so that's one of the things that gets disrupted for women. And so getting your sleep figured out is especially important for anyone, all of us. Men will experience problems with lymphatic clearance too if they're not getting enough sleep. But it becomes especially
conditions like sleep apnea, perhaps.
Exactly. Yeah, sleep apnea. A dozen different reasons why you might not be getting good sleep at night.
So, from my standpoint as a medical nutritionist, one of the reasons that I see for brain fog or cognitive problems is because of blood sugar metabolism and the fact that blood sugar sometimes, as you hit middle age, it starts to soar and plummet, and you have alternating high blood sugar and low blood sugar, and there's something that's called type 3 diabetes, which is the insulin resistance within the brain that develops in people who sometimes are obese and they have metabolic syndrome. And so there's actually problems with energy utilization in the brain, which is, I think, another aspect of that. So diet, talk about the importance of a healthy diet for optimal brain function, because, your brain is what you eat to some extent. So there's that. I think there's something unique about our time too, because the amount of fragmentation in our lives, I think, is unprecedented in the present day, and especially with the advent of social media and devices. We're trying to run too many programs simultaneously, and you actually speak to the issue of multitasking. And I don't think there's any busier executive in the world, who runs a multimedia company or conglomerate, who has a more crowded schedule and a bigger agenda than the average woman in midlife.
I think there are women who are going to stop right there and be like, I want to play this for my partner. This is so true. Yeah, and multitasking is tough. And can we do a quick demonstration of how
Sure.
Bad multitasking can be? And the reason I bring it up is because I know a lot of women, although men too, but I know a lot of women who take great pride in their multitasking. They'll say that they're better at multitasking than the man that they're married to, for example, if they're in a heterosexual relationship. However,
excuse me, an example of this multitasking and how it manifests for me is what I call coffee cup syndrome or iPad syndrome. Yeah. And if I did a time and motion study when I'm at home in my apartment, I would probably spend about 5 to 10% of my time walking from room to room to see where I left my coffee cup, or if I left it in the microwave. And where did I leave my iPad? Did I leave it in the bedroom, in the bathroom, in the kitchen, by the sofa in front of the TV? And so I'm walking back. So that's, I think, an example of,
perfect.
My brain is really crowded with stuff. I'm thinking of a lot of things simultaneously.
Exactly. Yep. And for me, I don't know if this happens to you too, but especially in the morning, I'm checking I bring up my phone. I'm sitting having my morning tea. I bring up my phone to check the weather, and I get distracted by another app, and I forget to check the weather, and I set my phone down, and I'm like, wait, I never checked the weather, right?
Exactly.
Right. Oh, what was I? And then another thing distracts me. Yeah, exactly. Yes. Well, so let me illustrate, if I may, how much harder multitasking is than single tasking, or monotasking, as some people like to call it, although I like single tasking. All right. So if you would, Ron, if you would play along with me out loud as fast as you can, count from 1 to 10, go.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Fabulous. And if I had timed that, it would have probably been like 2 seconds, maybe less. Mm-hmm. All right. Now I would like you to say the alphabet out loud as fast as you can. A to J, go.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J.
There you go. Great. And you even stopped at J. Usually people keep going, right? At least if they're native English speakers. All right. So that was single tasking or monotasking. So now let's try multitasking. What I want you to do is I want you to say a number and then a letter, like 1A, going through 1 to 10, go.
Like, okay, 1A, 2B, 3C, 4D, 5E, 6F, 7G.
Yes.
How am I doing?
You're doing great. You can stop. You've made the point.
I'm already multitasking because I am doing a podcast simultaneously and trying to appear, coherent and smart.
Exactly. Right. You're right. You're multitasking as it is.
Yeah.
And so this was, I think, quadruple tasking, if we want to count them all up. So what that beautifully illustrates is even
there's a slowdown.
There's a huge slowdown. Plus you begin making mistakes. And the further you get, the harder it gets. And people will say, oh, Therese, but when I multitask, it doesn't feel that way. But when you think about it, right, if you're trying to do an email while you talk with someone in the kitchen, in the kitchen of your apartment, what will end up happening is, you'll stop typing to talk with them, and then you have to reread the email. Wait, what have I already said? Yeah. What haven't I said? Right. And it's just like going back and saying, wait, which letter am I on? Right. You're like, except you're having to do it all in your head.
That just happened to be, I was doing show prep for this show. And then I sent a recording of a previous show to my producer, and it was the wrong recording.
Sure.
I was like, because I was trying to do too much at once. I was like, let me cram it in.
Yes.
I could do this. And
exactly.
I think part of the problem too these days is we have these wonderful machines called computers, and we have AI, and we have all these amazing things. And we hold ourselves to that standard. We think that we can be incredible machines and we can have machine-like precision. But in some ways, we're superior to machines. But in some ways, we can't cut it like that.
I hadn't thought about that, but it is true. We hear the analogy being made all of the time. And we also want to be the incredible source of immediate knowledge, right? That we see illustrated, especially with AI now. You can ask it any question and you don't have to stay curious for more than a few seconds, depending on your, how much is already built up in your algorithm. But it's, I do think it can be misleading. And I think, there's actually fascinating research showing. So on the one hand, multitasking is really bad. You make more mistakes. Research indicates you make up about 47% more mistakes. I don't mean you, Ron, but I mean in people in general. So I'm not surprised you gave that example of, sending the wrong file. We make a lot more mistakes. And if it's something that's important, that's not a place you want to make mistakes. But what's fascinating about the multitasking is there's actually research showing that they had people do two tasks at once, where they described it as though the researchers described it as though it was one task. And then they had people do the same two tasks where they told people, you're going to be multitasking. And what they found was when people told themselves, I'm going to be multitasking, their pupils got bigger, they focused more, and they actually had slightly better performance. So if they had been single tasking, they would have had the best performance. However, what ends up happening is if you do have to do two things at once, tell yourself I'm multitasking because it seems to make us gear up more. We try a little bit harder. So don't fool yourself. If you need to multitask, use that label. It will actually help you allocate more resources and you'll focus better. So it's one of these interesting things.
A little bit of a trick.
It's a nice trick.
Okay, folks, at this point, let's pause and allow one of our sponsors an opportunity to share an important message with you. So here goes. Listen up.
Have you ever heard someone say that probiotics didn't work for them? Since all probiotics are not the same, the probiotic you choose can make the difference between superior results and no results. Look for an enriched formula containing these 3 key components for best results: probiotics, prebiotics, and postbiotics. A worldwide leader in microbiome health for over 40 years, Dr. Ohhira's Probiotics is an enriched full-spectrum probiotic system fermenting multiple strains of probiotic bacteria and nourishing prebiotics. The result? Transformative postbiotic metabolites that maintain and support the biodiversity of flora in your gut for optimal digestion, gut-brain, and immune health. Dr. Ohhira's. Certified vegetarian, free of gluten, allergens, dairy, and GMOs. Get Dr. Ohhira's probiotics today at Sprouts, Natural Grocers, Whole Foods, and other natural health retailers nationwide.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting our sponsors. They're what make intelligent medicine a continuing free resource to you. And now back to today's guest, cognitive neuroscientist, Dr. Therese Houston. I think another thing, though, that fogs our brains, and you allude to this, is, and this is from neuroscience, is cortisol. And I have to say, I do a lot of broadcasting, and, occasionally something really upsetting will happen right before I go on. And I'm a trooper. I'll go on, and broadcast. I've been doing it for decades. But I got to say that my memory and recall are undermined by the pattern of stress that in whatever neurochemistry happens in my brain. Cortisol robs your brain of memory and capacity, right?
Absolutely. Right. It does. So it does a couple of different things. So on the one hand, it can briefly give you a perk of energy. It can give you some focus. I don't know if you've had that experience where you just all of a sudden, all the lights are on. The downside, though, is exactly what you've pointed out. So it actually inhibits your prefrontal cortex. So decision making, if you need to make decisions on the fly, those are going to be harder. And also it impairs memory. It long term, if you have hopefully this isn't the case for you, but if you have elevated levels of cortisol for long periods of time, it begins to
shrinks the hippocampus. Right.
Exactly. Yep. It shrinks the hippocampus, and that's something we all want more of.
The memory center of the brain. Yeah.
Exactly. It's the memory center of the brain. We want more of that, not less of it. And so, yes, high cortisol levels. A fascinating thing about cortisol is that it also reduces something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and that's crucial for learning. And so not only is your recall of memories potentially being affected, but your ability to form new memories can be affected by cortisol. So it's disruptive in a lot of different ways. On the one hand, cortisol helps you act, right? And so it's going to help you, it's going to energize you to move and take action. But for jobs like you and I have, where we're not moving, we're sitting and thinking, it can be a problem.
But paradoxically, stress or an emotional content or emotional context can help with memory. And I think sometimes of the example of the Buddhist monk who, sitting with his disciple, and then he hits the disciple with a stick. And the disciple says, why did you hit me with a stick? And the Buddhist monk says, so that you can more rapidly obtain enlightenment. So that there is something to it. And you actually allude to that, is that there's emotional learning, that it is actually a trick to help you learn better. Because if you read something in a kind of brain, you kind of glaze over it, it's boring. But if it's like in a context, an emotional context, how do you harness that practically to help you remember more or learn more?
Well, and so you're making such an important distinction there. So emotional learning goes up, and as a result, you'll remember if something upsetting has just happened. You will then you get a flood. You're suddenly basically taking in the environment, right? Mm-hmm. And so what they've found a fascinating thing is that if you do something upsetting, if you are, like, for instance, frightened or made angry or feel especially threat, so it's going to activate the amygdala, you will remember things that happened right before that instant of fear or threat. Mm-hmm. And the example that I like to give is that if you walk into your manager's office, you think it's going to be a normal meeting, and all of a sudden they close the door and they start telling you about something that you screwed up that you didn't realize was a mistake. You will remember not your walk back to your office. What you will remember is all of a sudden you'll have this incredible detailed memory of where your manager was sitting and maybe even what they were wearing that day, when you normally wouldn't remember those things, right? So you'll remember the things leading up to that moment of sudden threat. And it makes sense, right?
It's almost a mini PTSD.
Yeah.
But, I got to say that much of my medical training and hospital experience was like that, because, you make a mistake and you really, there's such a strong emotional content to it. It's not like, making a minor, spelling error.
Absolutely.
It has a lot of deep connotations, and you remember, and part of that is it really embeds that in your brain.
I would think, and it's probably very different from studying your textbook at home, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's where the learning really happens, at that point. You talk about dopamine, and dopamine is an important brain neurochemical, and we want to support our dopamine because dopamine has a lot to do with mood and learning and focus. So how can we, you give practical tips for supporting our dopamine. And they're interesting tips because, you could take supplements. Tyrosine, it's a precursor. That might work. But there are other things you can do that naturally enhance your dopamine levels, right?
And we started the conversation by talking about women at midlife, and dopamine levels are affected by estrogen. So this is especially relevant to them. I've heard from some women, I didn't have this problem when I was going through perimenopause, but I've heard from a number of women, they just don't want to get off the couch some days. They just feel so low. Their motivation is so low, and that's probably reflecting low dopamine, right? So I'm sure you've talked about dopamine on the show before. Dopamine isn't a pleasure chemical. It's more of a I want this chemical, right? It's more about wanting than having. Mm-hmm. So ways that you can, on days that you're not feeling very motivated, ways that you can increase your dopamine. One of my favorites now is, and we're recording this in the winter, one of my favorites is to go for a brisk cold walk, right? People are talking a lot about cold exposures.
Yeah.
However, it doesn't always work for me to go do a cold plunge. In fact, it
Right.
rarely works for me in the middle of a
Yeah.
workday.
That could be a little much for some people. I mean, I tried the cold shower route, when it's
Mhm.
invigorating, but, I kind of do it after a sauna. And it's kind of a wake-up call to the body.
It is. Oh,
So that's one of the ways to do that. And they've actually measured dopamine, and it really does that.
it really
Uh,
does. But it can be hard to do in the middle of a workday. So one of the
yeah.
things I'm taking to doing in the winter is I wrap a coat around my waist and I go for a brisk 10-minute walk outside, where I'm just basically wearing a t-shirt and light
A
pants.
little
And
deliberate cold exposure. Yeah.
deliberate cold exposure, exactly. Deliberate cold exposure. And I've got the coat in case something goes wrong and I
Yeah.
decide like this
Yeah.
is too cold and I need to
Yeah.
put it back
Yeah.
on.
Bail.
So yeah, exactly. You need a second option there. But when I come back to my desk 10 minutes later, I feel so focused.
Right.
I feel
Right.
so energized and motivated. So that's a nice one. Another that's been tested in the lab that I found really fascinating is to listen to music that gives you chills. This one I hadn't heard about before, but they're finding that when you listen to music that to you gives you like literally goosebumps, you get that thrill feeling, not the top 40. It can't be someone else's favorite music. It needs to be something that moves you. You
Right.
actually get a dopamine increase. And so that can be a quick way, get yourself a little playlist, a dopamine playlist,
Sure.
and the music, and it might change for you. Something that does it now might not do it 3 months from now. So you need
It
to
certainly
kind of
helps to motivate me to exercise, is that I always listen to music, when I exercise. And, it's like, for me, it's like I'm kind of stuck in the, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s.
Sure.
But,
Yeah.
Classic rock works
Yes.
for me. Yeah.
Exactly. And so to have that playlist of music that is going to, for a workout, but it could even work before a work day on a day when you've got to do something mundane. I'm about to do my taxes. I should.
I might mention that, one of the tasks that I find kind of boring is like when we do the laundry, I strip the bed, then I have to like make the bed from scratch. I got to put the cover around the thing.
Sure.
And I like to put my headphones on and listen to, some really exciting rock music because I don't know, it just gets me going a little bit to getting through a mundane task.
Exactly.
What about coffee and caffeine? Because you actually have some reflections on that. You're not inalterably opposed to caffeine. You think it's a tool that can be utilized judiciously.
Yes. And they find that in the lab, 300 milligrams of caffeine, which is a high dose of caffeine, right? That's a high single dose, will increase dopamine levels. Now, in the study that I'm referring to, these were for the most part overweight men, and so it could be that for a petite female, it would take much less caffeine, much less than 300 milligrams. But in any case,
metabolism. Some people are rapid metabolizers, some people slow metabolizers. They have a gene, whatever. So that a little dab will do you, or else they're almost inured to the effects of caffeine. They need more.
There's that true.
Yeah.
It's true
so you have
too.
to kind of find your comfort zone. You also like the combination of caffeine and something called theanine. So let's talk theanine, which this is essentially the ingredients of tea. And the Brits, they have tea time in the afternoon. And it's not the Starbucks moment. It's a time to sort of relax with caffeine, but something that takes the edge off caffeine and improves focus, right?
It is fascinating. So I'm already a tea drinker, I'll confess. But before I began to drink more green tea, in part because one of the ways that I like to drink tea is caffeine I like my tea with milk. And as you've already pointed out, what you really want for focus is a combination of caffeine and theanine. And theanine naturally occurs in tea leaves. It doesn't naturally occur in coffee. And when you combine caffeine and theanine, you get kind of a smooth energy that allows you to focus. And they actually find that it reduces activity in something called the default mode network of the brain, which is part of the reason they think. Basically, if the default mode network is going and firing on all cylinders, you might feel distracted.
Right.
And it seems to quiet.
The space out network.
Exactly. Yes. But yeah. Or some people refer to it as a creativity network. You're going to go in lots of directions, right?
Okay.
When you're brainstorming. However, if you're trying to focus, chances are you don't want to have that firing in such intensity. So caffeine plus theanine. So you could take a theanine supplement, but tea has it already naturally. And so it's really nice because it will give you focus pretty quickly. Of course, if you're sensitive to caffeine, maybe you can't do the afternoon tea time, but
because you can rob you of the sleep, and then you don't get the lymphatic drainage that you need.
Exactly. But what researchers have found that if what you want to kind of optimize the caffeine theanine combo is to not have your tea with milk. Actually, the milk will bind.
It vitiates it a little bit.
Yeah,
it
will
uptake of the.
Yeah, as a nutritionist, you probably know, right? Yeah. Exactly. Are you a fan of theanine? Are you?
I am a big fan of theanine. I think theanine is great, but I also, initially I didn't like the taste of tea, and I was, I don't drink a lot of caffeinated coffee. Rarely. I mean, like in an emergency, if I have like a long drive late at night, and have an emergency cup of coffee so I can really focus on the road. But I guzzle decaf, but I've steeled myself to enjoy tea in the morning, and I find it's less of a rocket ride in terms of energy, and it provides me more sort of there's less caffeine, and it's more stabilizing for me than regular coffee. All right, good point at which to pause. There are a lot more strategies that I want to cover here because there are practical strategies here. The book is sharp. 14 simple ways to improve your life with brain science. You're underselling it because there's dozens and dozens of simple ways to improve your life with brain science based on the latest findings in neuroscience with Dr. Therese Houston. She's a cognitive neuroscientist. And we're going to talk about, especially when it comes to women in midlife, how to optimize brain function and performance. If you're feeling brain dead, here are some answers. I'm Dr. Ronald Hoffman, and this is the Intelligent Medicine Podcast.